Hi, I'm Gordy Gundaker. Welcome to the Dirt Parlor podcast.
Hi, I'm Don Martin. Welcome to the Dirt Parlor. And this thing is big. This is Don Martin. Welcome to the Dirt Parlor podcast with my co-host,
Gordy Gundaker.
We're excited about having a guest on this week, Rick Eckert. Before we get into that, we got to thank our proud sponsors of Nutrien Ag.
Jeff Hoker with Hoker Trucking.
Bodies by Skinny, a Longhorn dealer. And your company,
Checker Custom Screen Printing and Embroidery, baby. That's right. That's right.
Tonight, we've got Hall of Famer Rick Eckert joining us tonight. And before we dive in a little bit with Rick, I think we got to touch base on, I don't think a lot of people realize what kind of career this guy's had. I mean, the guy's still winning. Won $5,000 last week at Seal and Scrub. And I don't mean to toot his horn because he's going to toot it already for us. But besides being a World of Outlaw champion, a two-time UDTRA Tampa champion, this is staggering. 38 Outlaw wins, 18 Tampa wins, 11 Stars win, 3 Lucas wins. And what's crazy is when the Outlaws started in 2004 to 2018, he finished in the top 5 in the points every year, but twice. And those were a 6th and a 7th place finish. And it gets better yet. From the span of 2002 to 2020, this guy has got 115 national wins. And this is the best because we always talk about how great of a point racer he was.
Yep.
Almost 500 top 5s.
That's not bad, Scrub.
And your wins include the Dream, the Dirt Track, the Firecracker, a couple of national 100s, Cedar Lake, Scorcher at the Gap. We're going to talk a little bit about that Masters, that McDowell little, we all kind of know what happened there. I want to talk about that one down the road with a little bonus, kind of a little fishy there, but kind of like an election or something like that. We'll talk about that a little bit later, but we're proud to have you. And again, I wanted to make sure that we talked about your accomplishments because they're well-deserved, brother. And, so we can start with there, but right off the bat, I got to ask, how'd you get the name Scrub? Right off the bat, I got to ask.
I didn't even know I was on. I was just listening. I was just checking everything out.
Yep.
Okay, so it's not a very cool story. Man, Bob's getting loud. It's not a very cool story. My dad was a truck driver. I was born. He was out of town. Back then, when you came in, the babies were in a glass window. And unusual. Now you can walk right in and steal them. But back then, they had them in a glass window. You had to look through the window. And I had a rash from milk. And he said, "Which one's mine?" They said, "That and there." He said, "That scrubby looking thing?" I said, "I've had it since about day 3. So it's not really a cool deal or anything, but it stuck with me.
Yeah, it's run with you for a long time. That's funny. I didn't know that story.
Neither did I.
So that's pretty good. I figured it was something happened on like a drunken night, or something along those lines.
And I got to tell you, you started in sprint cars. And being in Central PA where you are, in that hotbed there, you got in a sprint car. Talk about what made you go from one to the other. I mean, you went from sprint cars to late models.
No, you don't have your facts right.
Okay. Well, I know we did a sprint car earlier, and being in PA with sprint cars.
Actually, my father was a late model racer, so I drove late models first. And then at one point we did get a sprint car and ran it for about a year and a half. But I was racing late models before that, and then just did that for about a year, maybe a year and a half. Wasn't very good at it.
That's a whole different world. I got to drive. I ran the midget at Chili Bowl this past year, and them things it's a completely different style of racing and driving and all of that. Now
they're fun. The sprint car I didn't find much fun in, but the sprint car actually has a big wing, and you would think has lots of traction, and actually they're terrible. They got no traction. I don't know. It wasn't that much. Well, of course, I was working on it too, so that probably didn't help.
Oh shit.
Well, and I want to talk. One of the things I wanted to talk to you about naturally, and you're part of with the original Outlaws with the Dirty Dozen, when Scott and it kind of came together, and it was, I mean, a list of great drivers, and Scott brings you all together. And I remember even the T-shirt, like, I don't even know, did you ever get paid on the T-shirt deal? You know, like
Nah,
Scott was saying, like so much money was going to go to each driver off each shirt. I'm just curious, is that how that always worked out? So I know we didn't do a lot of different editions of that shirt.
yeah,
know?
no, I don't think so. But it was what it was. You know, Scott. I was one of the guys that liked Scott. Me and Scott got along well. We were totally different people, but we actually got along well.
Yeah.
Well, that takes me to the next one. I mean, naturally, you guys had a great relationship because you got Team Zero cars. And,
Yeah.
naturally, I think it's you guys drove a lot alike. I mean, you really did. I mean, your style and his were very similar. So was that one of the reasons, like when you first got with Scott in the Team Zero cars, was that kind of like what you were looking at?
Yeah, his cars he always drove. I drove similar to him. We drove with the right front, instead of driving with the right rear, which to each their own. It all works. But his cars did fit me well. We would work together. I'd work out of his shop there. I was there one time a month, working. And like only thing different when I was at his shop is we didn't work together a lot because our schedules were different. So he came in, I had 3/4 of my day in. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I don't think you can talk about it like, and I want to kind of get into some other subjects, Rick, because you're at a part of your career, you've done everything, you've run with all the series, you've won every race there is to win. And I'd like you to talk about, there's been a lot of talk about the high limit with the charters. And I know you follow sprint car racing just like you're a fan, just like everybody else. And there's been, a lot of controversy over streaming, charters, et cetera. And I'd really like to dig into that a little bit with you guys tonight, a little bit, because it was like I was at Knoxville over the weekend. And the high limit guys, a half a dozen or so showed up with a race with the Outlaws. And actually the high limit guys actually took 4 of the top 5 spots. And there was only like half a dozen of them there. And I get it's Knoxville, it's one race, but at the same time, gravel and that, they were all there. Macedo, they were all there. So I think the big thing is, I'd like to know, what are your thoughts on the charters that you see out there at the high limit?
So first of all, is it really going to ever happen? I mean, possibly. I don't know. You know what I mean? It seems, I don't know. It seems pretty far out there to me, but it seemed like a really positive thing, like it was going to happen. And then in an interview, you see where they might sell high limit to dirt car motorsports, and I'm like, wait a minute, what happened there? So I don't know. If it happened, it'd be great. I mean, the teams realistically, since the internet and all this streaming came along, probably the biggest beating gets by the promoter. He gets the biggest beating because he puts his races out there. People don't, if the weather's bad, people don't come because they can watch it on the internet. I heard a racer races on the Lucas Oil Tour one day complaining about that, and he said, I don't care about this streaming. It don't do me anything anyway. And I said, listen, you probably ought to back up a little bit. Your father has a racetrack. It doesn't help him, but you sell a lot of T-shirts from it. You know what I mean? So it does help the racer some. It really does, because you can watch races all over the country that you never could watch for before in your area. So it's great. It's a cool tool. It just wish it could be figured out to where the promoters probably need to get more than they do. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, I think, and I'm probably going to go probably too far in depth on this, but, might overstep a little bit, but I guess I really don't care anymore about it because it's like,
I'll probably
I had a conversation. Huh?
I'll probably overstep way worse than you if you bring up the way.
Yeah. Well, so I had a conversation with somebody pretty predominant in the series, in one of the series. And we had a conversation about, what they were giving back to the racetracks with their streaming money. And I flat out said, hey, how much do you guys give back to the promoter. I already know the number because I've seen the contract that mom and dad had with the series, right? So he says, oh, well, you know, it's 10% of the streaming money if you have a purse that's $75,000 or less. If you have a $75,000 or more purse, you get 20% or something like it's something like that. It's whatever the percentage was. And it pretty much, it turns out to like the difference between $5,000 and like $8,000 or $9,000. Well, they said, we think that's pretty good. So I said, yeah, that is pretty good. But what's your sanction fee? Well, my sanction fee is $7,500. So I said, so it's really not that good, right? So really, you're just putting that money right back in your pocket. You know, you're telling the promoter you give them money, but really you're taking it right back away from them with a sanction fee. And I mean, for me, that's frustrating. I see the promoter side of it with mom and dad. I've tried to promote a race. You know, we got rained out doing it, but in the same time, there's so much more for them to give. I don't feel like that they don't give back. I think that there is times, I think they did a great job when we come out of COVID and Flo put on all those races. You know, they've got the Castrol series. You know, you see some of that, but you also look now, to me, look at Dirt Vision and World Racing Group and how all of a sudden they've had Dirt Vision, I don't know how many years. It's been a long time. And all of a sudden, I feel like they just started coming off all that money when you got High Limit bringing it in and you saw XR run that up on those guys. And all of a sudden it was like, oh, well, we got another 150 grand. We can pay the winner of the series. So, you know, I don't know. I think the guys I think the point of it is good, but I think, you know, the guys riding at the helm of it are a little derivative on how they want to spend it and what they really want to give back and what they want to put in their pocket.
So, is this live?
No, but it will be technically.
Yes.
Well, because listen, we don't know. Nobody knows what the number is. You know what I mean?
That's true. That's true.
So, but here's the weird thing that never comes up is before Dirt Vision and before Lucas Oil TV, there was only one guy doing this.
Steve Gigas?
No. Who was the guy?
Greg Stevens?
No.
He was doing a lot of
Dirt on dirt.
Rigsby.
So there's one guy before COVID that was doing all of this. So he's the first guy to complain about them not giving enough back, but he gave like $250 fast times twice a year out. You know what I mean?
Yeah, right.
So I know you guys don't want to touch that, but he's the first guy.
I'm with you. I'm good with it because listen, I argued this point.
Nobody
till
brings
I'm red
it up.
in the face.
Nobody brings it up. There's two people sharing that money now, but there was only one guy that had that money. You know what I mean?
Yeah, right.
That's right.
Yeah. Well, and you're not wrong. And that's the thing is we all see it. I think as racers, we look at it from a standpoint of the races pay, you know, I feel like now there's a lot more higher paying races, right? We look at it that way and go, well, they're giving back and, you know, they're helping us out. But Scrub, you've raced God knows how long. You used to race for 10 grand 25 years ago.
My opinion is they have raised the purses, which these guys raced at travel on the road on the Lucas and the World Outlaw Tour. They raced for a lot more money than I raced for. You know what I mean? So they have raised the purse as well. I still think, and I'm a racer, but I still think that the guy that gets beat the hardest is the promoter. You know what I mean? And nobody knows the number. Maybe we're jumping way over our head. Maybe the number isn't as high as it gets rumored it is. You know what I mean? And if it is as high as it's rumored, then some people are greedy, but there's two greedy people now, and there was only one greedy person.
Yeah. Well, I think clearly these streaming services aren't just popping up out of thin air for no reason, right? There's a reason that they're making these come up, right? Now you got XR, you got Hunt the Front. You have, I don't know how many we have now. It's 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. I don't know. There's a bunch of
Power Ice got their own.
right. So, we went down to Springfield, Missouri and raced at Jerry Hoffman's place. And he told me clear as day, he said, I need these guys to go on here and buy my Springfield Raceway TV. He said, because I'm going to make a hell of a lot more money off of that than I am off of people in the grandstand. Well, he owns it. So that, that makes sense. But the rest of these promoters don't. And we're still expected to pay the big purse, get people sit in the grandstands. But in reality, the streaming service that's covering it's honestly praying that it looks like rain or whatever and more people tune in. We just went to.
It'd be great if they could figure out how to black out the area within 200 miles of the racetracks.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It would help the promoters a lot. If they could figure out, and I would imagine that's possible. I'm not a very smart guy, but they do football games and shit that way. You know what I mean? So like if the Eagles are playing, they black it out. You know what I mean? To where you either go or you don't see it. So I don't know how hard that is. Maybe it's harder than it sounds, but I think that would help the promoters a lot.
Yeah. I've thought of a way of something like that, not necessarily the same, but I thought about having like when I try to promote a race, about doing one that's an old school style that's not on streaming, that says, hey, you can only see this race if you come watch it in person. And, you can only do that so much these days because you got too many sponsors and too many people that need the recognition, that give for that recognition. But at some point there has to be a give back or a give and take with the promoter, because like you said, they're the ones that are taking the hit on this because there's 400 or 500 less people sitting in the grandstands because they can watch from home. They can buy an all year pass for $400. Well, if they go sit at 2 weekends worth of races, they spend $400.
That's right.
So
that's exactly what I was going to mention.
Yeah. And
one race trip is basically that's your subscription to Dirt Vision.
Yeah.
The problem is how many of these, like you said,
It's not the same as being there live, though, guys.
It's not.
Streaming's great, but there's nothing like being there live.
And as Gordy would tell you, you'll miss the after party.
You're damn right you will. Hey, you taught me that.
You'll miss the after party.
Yeah, you taught me that. Don't.
You were like
it cost Gordy's Major League Baseball career. The night staying with you.
It wasn't my fault.
Yeah. Okay, so let's talk about this real quick. Hold on. Let's not skip over this. I don't want to skip.
It's the FedEx 50, I believe, right? It was the FedEx 50.
Yeah, the FedEx.
And what's crazy about this is the biggest thing that people need to understand about this. This party went to like hours and hours of the morning, and these guys the next day drove all the way to Grand Forks.
Yeah, North Dakota.
Right?
Yes. That's a long night, by the way. It was a short night and a long day.
Yeah. I just remember, from what I remember, I should say, we walked up, we were all hanging out in the midway, me and you, Jacobson, and God knows how many people sitting there. And Scrub looks over at me and he says, here, eat one of these. And it's a nice little thing of a Jell-O shot. So I have no idea what it is. So I eat one of them. Sure. A couple minutes later, Scrub says, here, have another one of them. And he just keeps shuffling them to me. About an hour later, I'm like,
family. And he's your hero, right? So of course you're going to do whatever he tells you to do.
Yeah. So Scrub at that point is like, I'm Rick Eckert, everything. Anytime Scrub comes to town, I'm over there hanging out at the Orange Hauler, going to see Crystal. I'm running in there getting my new Scrub shirt. So he's like, here, eat one of these. I'm like, yeah, just tell me how many you want me to eat. I'll just keep chewing them down. And next thing you know, I'm hammered sitting in the grandstands of my parents' place at 14.
Eric Jacobson told me when they left that morning, he said, when you guys left that morning, he said Gordy was still in a picnic bench.
Yeah.
There was people in the bleachers still. There were still people in the bleachers. There's not a lot of places that have good endings like that.
Yeah. We had that. I'll never forget that one. I can promise you that much.
And back to the promoting side, Rick, you ever thought about promoting a race?
I never thought about promoting. I would like to promote a racetrack. I think there's some stuff that I could do that could make a race track, the whole deal better. But everybody thinks that way. So whether it would be better or not, I think in our area here, a lot of what's missed is track preparation, and it's missed in a lot of areas. You know what I mean? Is they've had the same guy doing tracks for 30 years, but there's plenty of guys that had a job for 30 years that weren't very good at it. You know what I mean? It just happens. I'm just saying, what I mean?
I'm with you. No, but you're not wrong. But and that's the thing too, is I feel like over time, everything else has evolved, but that's a lot of the stuff that stays the same. It's like tracks have changed and dirt's changed and race cars have changed, and we still try to do the dirt the same way we did it 15 years ago.
I told a promoter around here one time, they said, we had 16 different winners last year. I said, yeah, but it was all from the front row. I said, so that's not good. Well, even though it sounds good on paper, it's not good. And I said, and the problem is you got the guy that gets paid the least doing one of the most important jobs. You know what I mean? So some of that gets missed, and I hate that when I go to a race and it's a bigger race and it's just awful conditions, and you're like, man, it's a shame that they spent all this time promoting this and spent this time for advertising and didn't just spend some time on this racetrack, And it was no different when we were on tour. We would go to places when I was on tour, we'd go to places sometimes and I'm not sure they knew we were coming. You know what I mean? When we got there. It's like, I'm not sure they knew we were coming.
Showed up unannounced.
Yeah, it's like, did anybody tell these people we were showing up this weekend?
Oh shit! Well, it's bad to say because I don't like. The last thing I like doing is track bashing, but it hasn't changed.
I don't either.
It hasn't changed, unfortunately. We still go to events or racetracks or places that it's nothing against them. They're just not prepared to have a caliber event or have the preparation to do those, those big events. And really all it ends up doing is putting them out in the future for ever getting a big series back. I mean, we did that. Heck, when we raced up there, I don't know what place that was, that fairgrounds in PA, 2 or 3 years ago when we were up there with the Outlaw Tour. I don't know if it was their fault or not, but it was a cornfield. I mean, we were literally, it was Baja racing, and I think we all told Francis after, like, hey man, we do not need to be at a place like this. I don't remember where it was, the name of it, but it was not fun, and it was.
I'm not going to bash him, so I'm not going to say the name.
Right, I'm glad I don't know the name.
Yeah,
It was funny, Rick. There's one thing I always remember. Scott Bloomquist once told me, it was like, we don't need to be going nowhere that nobody knows who I am. Scott used to say, we don't need to go no track that they don't know who I am. It's like, if they don't know who I am, we do not need to be there.
You had a good point. I don't think he ever did make it to that Weber Valley, did he?
What's that?
I don't think he ever did make it to that Weber Valley. What is that? That's so awesome. I don't know who does that, but that's so awesome.
It is funny. It is funny. They got some good stuff
funny.
On that one.
Yeah. I don't do a lot of social media, but every now and then I'll catch one of them and I'll be like, that's funny as shit.
That is funny. But one of the things I wanted to talk to you, we talk about how you were talking about drivers winning from the front row and everything. We see it more and more and more. It's really tough if you don't qualify in the first 3 rows and win a race. And the other thing I wanted to talk about, because we talked about purses and you were talking about purses, is like, I'd like to know the ideal purse for you. Like, and I'm not talking the majors, but a lot of these top heavy purses, like all I hear about from the drivers, like, yeah, that 50 grand to win, that's wonderful. But that guy that finished third at a 50,000 win race and gets like 5 or 7 grand, he goes, that's not so great. And I'd like to know kind of like the ideal from both of you guys. And it doesn't, because sometimes you're going to get the same cars. If it's 20 grand to win, you're going to get the same cars you're going to get as you would 50 or 100 grand.
I'll bet you Gordy and I have different opinions.
You think we'll have different opinions?
I think so. So I'll let you go first.
Okay. So my ideal, if you're going to go race a weekend and I don't know, let's just say it is an outlaw event, right?
Right.
I thought we were talking like a big show.
Let's talk a big show.
Okay, if you want to, okay. So my ideal big show purse is 25,000 to win. I think 25,000 to win is plenty. And I think it needs to trickle down to where it's 2,500, $3,000 to start, somewhere in that realm. But that guy that runs fifth needs to still make 8 to 10 grand. And the only reason I say it is, you know, just as well as I have, right? You've started 20th in a race and drove to 5th or 6th and worked your ass off to get all the way up there for $700 more than what the guy you started next to that finished back there.
I agree.
You passed 13 cars and you got $700 more than he did. And all he did was just ride around for 50 laps, and you worked your ass off to pass 13 cars. And really all it worked out was every car you passed was $15 or $50, you know, like to me, I think there's some give and take there. I think purses should be 80, 90, $100,000. Don't get me wrong. I think there should be that especially with the streaming and all that, but I think that needs to come from the streaming. I think they should be bound to 10 or 20 grand to every big race if they want to advertise it. But I think that it shouldn't be any less than $3,000 to start. That's probably the lowest.
Okay.
Well, if you remember, remember West Plains. It was like, that was the first one to really have the big start.
This is my exact answer. So here's the problem with that, Gordy. I'm going to tell you the problem with that is we used to run West Plains, Missouri. The guy was awesome.
Greenville.
What was his name? Oh shit.
The Gibsons that ran the place.
Great people. I mean, super nice people. We went there. These people paid, I think the first time I went there, it might have been like 27,000 to win, 2,700 to start.
Yep.
The last time I went there, I think it was 34,000 to win, 3,400 to start. Let me tell you why that don't work. And I always felt bad for that guy. That guy paid all that money, and here's the problem.
I know what he's going to say.
On lap 10, the first caution, 10 guys pull in because they're happy they made $3,500. So my opinion is every spot has to pay $500 at least different. That way, if you get a flat tire, he's like, I'll get a tire. I'll come back here. I can at least make me, a couple grand by getting a tire. I felt bad. If you look back at West Plains, Missouri, I will bet you 14, 15 cars finished that race every year. It's a shame because the guy paid great money, but everybody was happy to, if your car was shitty and you were going to run terrible, first caution, it was like they had their blinkers on. So that's why I don't agree with that. I think every spot should be at least a $500 or $1,000 spot. That way, if you get a flat tire, you come back. I think we owe it to the fans as far as them not seeing 10 cars finish, if that makes any sense.
Yeah. I'll tell you, last year when I was going to have my race, one of the rules I had in my race, because mine paid $2,500 to start. It was a 50-lap race, $2,500 to start. It was $20,000 to win. One of the rules in my race was if you pulled off before halfway without being lapped or braking, you got half your start money.
Well, they used to do that
because of that reason.
They used to take your money at Cedar Lake. You realize that, right? Remember Don O'Neill one night started on pole of one of the races at Cedar Lake and broke an axle, warming his tires up, and pulled in, and they wouldn't pay him.
Yeah, because he didn't start the race.
But they wouldn't pay him because I think he started the race in the back and pulled right in the first lap, but they wouldn't pay him because his car wasn't broke, which it's hard to do that. You know what I mean? It's hard to make that judgment call because if a guy's motor's getting hot, you can't make a guy run. You don't know if a guy's having motor problems, starts missing or something, nobody wants to blow a motor up for an extra couple $100. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I think you just got to make the spots pay enough difference that it's attractive to keep going.
Yeah. I mean, I don't disagree with that one bit because as racers, as competitive racers, you want every spot anyways. One of the things I've always saw on those purses is, I don't know if you've ever ran some of those races where they pay like 10,000 to win, and it's $9,000 for second and $8,000 for third and all that. I don't think those work that great either because to me, like if I got a shot to win the race and I'm running second behind you, I'm not going to go in there and try to wipe you out going, well, I could either make 10 grand or I could make 9 grand. I could probably just ride here and call it good. You know, I always think there needs to be a gap difference from first to second, but that intermittent deal, there's got to be some kind of pickup. I mean, the days of it being, you know, 500 to start and it pays from 11th to 24th pays 500 and it's $50 a spot above that. That doesn't work. I hate those purses because you race all night. You know, if you start in the back and drive all the way forward, by the time you get there, you've made like $300.
Yeah, nobody's top heavy purse. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Would you prefer to race like for 2 days of 2 equal purses at a track? Or would you prefer, you like the smaller purse on a Friday and then have a bigger one on Saturday? You know, I mean, I always notice like when we go to Wheatland for the show me, it's like there's nobody in the stands on Thursday. Friday it gets a little healthier, and then Saturday it's like everybody is there, and for the big money night. And I just was curious, like from you being a racer, if you're like, you know, I'd rather race for 15,000 to win on Friday, and maybe bump it up to 20,000 to win on Saturday, then versus a 7,000 to win on Friday and 40,000 to win on Saturday. You know,
I'm just glad to have 2 races nowadays, because back in the day we used to
go.
One race. You qualified Friday, race Saturday, pretty much every week. You know what I mean? And you could lead the whole race. You could lead, back then everything was 100-lap races, and you could lead 98, 99 laps, get a flat tire, and you left there with 800 hours or 500 hours. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I think it needs to be a second purse higher, my opinion.
Okay.
Makes them both races not mean the same. You know what I mean? Makes the second race mean a little more. I sort of like that part of it.
Yeah. You know, and that brings me to the point I'd like to talk to you about a little bit of, like, remember the old World 100, man. You went in, you guys, I thought it was the greatest thing in the world. You guys went in there on Thursday, you load in, and then Friday you do your 2 laps of qualifying, and that was it. And then Saturday, of course, we get the heat races. And I can tell you those old days in the World 100, I know as drivers you didn't like it, because I used to hear from Scott, oh, that's great, you know, you're all pumped up, but I want to go out there and I think we should hot lap. And I like when you guys would go on the track. Well, I think it added something to the atmosphere. You know, it almost gave you chills when you'd hear Fred and Eric going, gentlemen, you have 30 minutes to present your cars for the first heat race, you know, and you see everybody walking down their cars and the staging area. And I was just curious if now we go there and you're racing multiple features. And I've talked to a lot of drivers, and they said the reason that the car counts were so good back in those days, he says, because you only had to run 2 laps qualifying and you had a heat race in that second. He goes, they don't have the budgets to go up there and race hard for 3 or 4 days. It's too hard on the equipment. Yeah. So I'd like to talk to you guys a little bit about that. I'd like to get your input on that. What format you like there?
So the one thing I think is missing at Eldora that was the coolest part was, and everybody would hate to have to do it again, but it was actually very cool. So we would race Friday, Saturday, right? So Thursday we would tech in. Well, we would tech up top. We did pull your rig inside the gate, 2 or 3 guys. You had to unload, tech your car, load back up. Well, they would people would sit there. There'd be several hundred people sitting there watching tech. You know what I mean? And it was actually, we always thought it was a pain in the ass, but when you look back on it, it was actually a pretty cool deal. You know what I mean? That for the fans, for sure, you know, they'd sit there and you shoot with everybody, you unload, they tech you, put your car back in the trailer. You had to load it back up and then drive to the infield. So here was the deal. The reason there was 240 cars or 220 cars or 180 cars is there was never that many that could win. You're right. But there was a lot of guys that wanted to say they made a lap or 2 at Eldora. You know what I mean? So really, I don't know if probably most people nowadays don't even understand what the format was, but the format was you drew 2 pills, you got 1 lap for your first pill, and then everybody went through, and then your second pill come up. So you could draw 2 bad pills or 2 good pills. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But that so in them 2 laps, if there was 200 and I think one year there was 240 cars, we were there, and in them 2 laps, you had to be in the top 120. If you weren't in the top 120, you loaded up and left. You know what I mean? They threw you right out. There was no option to run the heat race. So that part is probably why they got the cars. You're probably right. I never understood it. I never understood that part because I thought, it doesn't seem fair that everybody don't get it run a heat race. But probably half them guys didn't ever intend on running the heat race. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Just want to be a part of it.
Yeah.
Well, and we got to talk about the one thing. If we don't talk about this, we got to talk about body rules. I mean, Rick, you've seen from the cars. You know, I just keep hearing air hogs. You know, everything's air dependent. Everything else, you know, and you were there from the Stars days to, you know, and I talked to Mark Richards even about it. Mark said to me, he goes, you know, and I thought it was funny. 3 things that Mark said that needed to be changed in the sport that he thought were issues. And the one was, he goes, first of all, track prep. And you hit it right on the head. That was the first thing Mark said. And he said, the second thing he goes, I think the bodies, we've got to figure out a way to race again. And the other thing, of course, is the tire situation. But I'd love to know kind of like what you think, what would you like to see done to these cars to make them better where you can race more?
Scrubs doesn't say nothing because he's killing them.
It's 1 4 out of 5. Yeah,
Leave it alone. Doesn't say anything.
Yeah, he's winning. He says leave it the same.
Here's my opinion: is yeah, right now I don't want anything changed, but could the racing be better if the bodies were square? For sure. Like they got the cars now to where, and I'm old, so you got to drive the shit out of them every lap. And Gordy drives them. He understands. You know what I mean? The bodies are so crooked. Even when you're loose, you're not loose like you used to be loose. You know what I mean? You're a little loose. You don't get crazy. So you have to drive hard every lap and extremely hard. Here's the most amazing thing about it is the 2 major series will tell you how everybody beats the rule and don't fix it. You know what I mean? That's the amazing part. They know how the rules get beat and refuse to act like they even know. You know what I mean? But here's the deal. It's no different than Cup cars were there when that year Harvick won everything. The bodies are so crooked. So you got to get the bodies back in line with the wheels somehow. You know, whether obviously the mathematic equation that they came up with was real easy to beat. You know what I mean? It's and really you're beating it is it's sort of stupid. Like I say, they know how you beat it. You know what I mean? The tech, it's the only kind of racing I know that the tech guys know how they're getting beaten, don't do anything about it, you know? So, but I think that comes from their bosses that they can't, nobody wants to rock the boat. You know what I mean? Yeah. And here's another thing is I think that they all go about it at the wrong time. You know, my opinion is if you want to fix these cars for next year, July, August, you need to explain how you're going to tech next year. Yep. This is how we're going to do it starting speed week. So that gives the guy all that time to either figure out how to try to beat it or to run his stuff. And it's not easy to change them back. You know what I mean? It's a lot of work. You know, you can't just do that. I heard him say, well, we're going to go to speed week, and then after speed week, we're going to change the rules. Well, that's the worst time in the world. You know what I mean? Because you spend all winter building cars, you go to speed week, and you got to completely rebuild cars again. You don't have time to do all that. You know, teams don't have enough people to do that.
Well, and that's too. It's like to move a body back in line, and everything. That's you're changing deck pieces, you're changing T-bars. I mean, there's a lot that goes into that, well beyond just, hey, let's just run the body straight. But and you tell me if you think I'm wrong on this or not. But here's the other part, right? Like when you look at our series, right, our tech directors or who's making these rules. I mean, Francis is there, but we don't have guys that have the knowledge, to me, to tech these cars. at the end of the day, like, I don't think, for instance, if you go run a Summer Nationals race, I think you could probably have, if you put 8 illegal parts on your car and you gave them 4 hours to look at it, they might find 2. You know, it's like, you don't know what they're looking at. And I think that's another part of it, because there's just a bunch, you know, to me, it's like, there's not a lot of knowledgeable guys that are doing the tech on these cars or making these rules. It's kind of an open forum. Like, oh, okay, well, we saw this guy did this, we're going to hurry up and take that rule out. Or, okay, well, we made this rule, we don't know how, you know, we know they beat it, but to change it again, you know, we don't know how to really change it to get them all back in line. I don't think they know. Honestly, I don't think they have a real, you know,
I think it's above the tech guys. I think the tech guys are fine. I think their hands are tied. You know, I think it's above them where these calls are being made. And that's okay. If they want to let it like this, okay, it is what it is. And I think some of that is they get pressure from the car builders. You know what I mean? I think
yes,
they say, hey, we build these cars, we're building this way, too bad. You know, where at some point you'd have to take your own stance and say, hey, listen, I don't care. I'll make you build that way. When they get here, if they don't pass, they don't pass. You know what I mean?
yeah, yeah.
But
well, I think too, like, you know, at the end of the day, there is a lot of tolerance with bigger teams that are on the road. I think there's a lot of, like you said, I think I agree with you when you talk about higher ups. Like, the one thing about now with all the series is everybody's got each other's hands in each other's pockets, right? So there's a lot of that goes on, to me, that says, like, okay, well, hey, we need to stay doing it this way, or, you know, our cars are built like this, so we don't want to get the rules changed because that's going to cause us a bunch of work. I think there's a lot of that happens. And I can't say I blame them, because there's a lot of money that comes from teams and sponsors to these series that fund stuff. But at some point, you know, there has to be a stop to all this, because we just keep letting it get more out of control every day. You know, that's the way. I mean, you look at now what we pay for the parts on our race cars. I mean, in the last 6 years, I mean, I bet we've taken a 25, 30, 35% hike on everything we're doing, because of technology and how far we just keep letting things get out of control. I mean, it's kind of ridiculous, honestly.
I was offered a tech job, and I said, listen, if I was a tech guy, everybody for the first 2 weeks would be mad, and the third week, all the crew guys would come to me and say, hey, man, thank you. You know what I mean? Because
right.
if you backed your car out of your trailer and you had to have the body braces off, you're illegal. You know what I mean?
Yeah, right.
So
I'm illegal then.
The trailers are big enough. You know, I mean, they should fit in the trailers. You know, so you just walk down to the pits and see half of them have the quarter panel, the door, and the nose piece braces off to get in and out of their trailers. It's like, well, obviously we're running a little crooked then. You know what I mean?
I mean, I go back and look at, I mean, we got them hanging in the shop. You know, we got all of Dad's old wedge cars and the old pictures of the Larry Shaw cars he built and the Bullet chassis that he built. And you look at the bodies on those things, and you look at what we have now, it is so polar opposite in every sense. Everything about these cars are so different body-wise than what was raced on for 10, 20 years. And now it just keeps getting worse. I mean, and I don't know when it's going to, like I said, I don't know when it's going to stop. I don't know who's going to put a stop to it. And I don't know if they will, but it's,
in my opinion,
I hate doing it.
My opinion is some of it needs to be handled just because of the work aspect. There's just way too much work in it. You know, what happens is the more it gets out of hand, the more work you got to do, the more the teams have more employees and more personnel get ahead of their other teams. You know what I mean? So a guy like you trying to race on tour with one guy or two guys, and you get teams with four guys, they can change a lot of stuff and it doesn't affect them. But if you got to change all the stuff when you get your car out of the trailer every time, and you got to do it before you load back up, and it's to me it's a lot of extra work for. Now, don't get me wrong. I can't just sit here and tell you that if we squared these cars back up, that they would race better. I think they would, but I don't know that for a fact. Our tires change, everything we have changed. You know what I mean? And the racetracks change, like you say. Racetracks tend to not last as long as they once did. You know, and I don't know if it's our cars. I don't know if it's our tires. I don't know. I do know one thing. Driving a race car, it's easier to pass somebody with a tight race car than it is if your car's loose.
Yeah.
So when you loosen them back up, I don't know. Will it put it back in the driver's hands or will it make it harder to pass? I'm not sure.
Yeah. I'll tell you what, last night I saw a video on on Facebook that popped up, and it was at Volusia of Moyer and Francis racing for the championship. I don't know, the one year.
I know exactly.
Right?
Yeah.
I mean, I know you obviously were in that race, but seeing the racetrack at Volusia compared to what we race on today at Volusia, it's not even, there's no relativity to it all. This place was as black slick as could be. It was slow. It was pacing around there. And you watch the race cars and how they moved. And to me personally, I looked at it and thought, man, I wish I grew up racing in that era compared to what this era is. And not because I don't enjoy it, but I feel, you know, and you would know better, but I feel like 25 years ago, it was more in the driver's hands than it is today. I think I'm not taking away from that. There's not guys that aren't talented or whatnot, or, you know, but I think there's a lot, that gap from the very top to the very bottom was a lot different 25 years ago, because there was a lot more pure race car drivers than guys that could just go out and spend the money and say, okay, you can go out and qualify 14th right now with all the stuff you just bought.
Yeah, I don't know. You know, the difference was back then was when you bought a car, you still had to figure them out. Now you can go to Rocket, you can go to Longhorn, you can go to whoever, and you can buy a car, and they will say the shock's already smashed, and they will put you right in the ballpark. You know, where back then you had to figure that most of that stuff out yourself. You know, there wasn't like a lot of shock companies. Like now you got shock companies, you got guys that just go around and help and, you know, pay and consult people. You know, there's a lot more help nowadays than there used to be. Used to be you had to figure a lot out on your own.
Yeah. You used to have to get the grain scales out, take 9 turns out here and 11 there.
I still use them.
Hey, we still got them. I still got them at the shop. We use ours too. Yeah. I grew up on them. See, that's the one thing I don't think, and that's another thing. I bet there's not a lot of guys these days now that maybe have got into it in the last 5 to 10 years that know how to use a set of scales or know how to read some of that stuff.
The crazy part is I wish somebody would go and do shop deals, because I would be willing to bet that there's a lot of people that race, and even people that race on tour, that don't have scales, probably don't even have a sheet metal brake, you know, or a tubing bender, you know, where it's nowadays. Old racer told me one day, he says, "Oh yeah, you guys catalog race." I'm like, "What?" He says, "Yeah, you catalog race. Just open the catalog, order every piece." And I'm like, "No, there's a lot to that." You know what I mean?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
You think about that, it's a lot to that.
Yeah, you're not wrong. And that's, I mean, I think for me, I'm glad I was, you know, raised with dad in a sense where I had to, you know, I was taught how to use, you know, a sheet metal brake. I was taught how to build my own bodies. I was taught how to work on my own stuff. I'm appreciative of that more than anything, because I don't have to rely on some of that stuff. Like we can go build our own bodies. We can do all of our own things. And that to me is what racing's always been about to me, right? I've always had a passion for it because I love being in the shop till 2 a.m. Don't get me wrong. Like I don't necessarily want to be, but I enjoy that when you're just tinkering on your race car and you're working on something. That's something that's always driven me to want to be better, because that's where you find speed late nights or you work on things or find something, and that's always been enjoyable. But I think you're right. I bet there's half the teams probably don't have some of that stuff now.
Yeah, pretty crazy. Actually, pretty crazy, really.
Well, I also want to bring up, you brought it up already, Rick, a little bit, how changing everything kind of mid-season. Here we go. We got a tire deal now. And I'd be curious to know kind of from both of you now, the tire thing seems to be a hot topic right now. Which teams actually have a little bit of advantage? Have you tested with them over other teams? And you've got this. And like you said, boy, this would have been great if it would have come out maybe at the end of, or start talking about it last year, but all of a sudden now throw it at me a little bit. And I'd be curious to see what kind of, and you've always though have been, I know we've had these conversations in the past, Rick, where we've talked about tires a little bit. And because you were like, man, dude, I know where I'm at sometimes. I get beat by an American racer, and all of a sudden now, they're not allowed to race at certain events and everything else. And I'd be curious to know what's your position on the tire status now?
Mine is so when Hoosier came out with a tire and they went with the UMP style tire, I was shocked sort of because they're capable of making the best dirt late model tire in the world. You know what I mean? But they decided not to make it. They decided to make the UMP tire. So I asked the guy that works there, is that tire cheaper to make? And like his answer was no, which it must be cheaper to make, because why would you make, when you're capable of making really great stuff, why would you make okay tires? But it sort of shocked me they came out with this tire, because really, I haven't heard a problem with tires, as far as anybody complaining. I think they opened themselves up for some complaining now, because normally, like in the past, when we had open tires and we had UMP tires, the one thing you never did is you never put open tires on the back and UMP tires on the front, because UMP tires never steered. You know what I mean? So nobody even knows they don't steer, because you have UMP tires on the front and the back. So now they're going to give us a tire that supposedly is going to stick harder on the right rear. I think that in the next year, they're going to build a front tire now, you know what I mean? Because they're going to have to. I think that everybody's going to complain and say, well, now I can't steer. I'm not, it's sort of baffling that they did that. I don't understand it.
Have you run it yet up there in PA?
I ran it this weekend. I did.
Yeah.
I ran second and one night and won the second. I ran the same tire both nights.
Yeah.
I can't honestly say that it was a whole lot different. You know what I mean? Yeah. I can't really say. It should have been tighter, but I can't say that it was on my car in the two tracks that I went to. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I would say on short little racetracks, it's going to be a better tire. I think on big racetracks, it could be a better tire, but you're going to have to work on your car. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I mean, that's about how I felt, because I ran it Saturday for the first time. Well, technically Friday, but I was attempting Friday. But Saturday, Saturday, I don't know if I noticed a difference either.
What track were you?
We were at Burlington, 34
Okay.
Racer. So, which is crazy to me. I haven't been to Burlington in like, I don't know, probably 4 or 5 years. And
Great racetrack.
Awesome. It reminded me of Wheatland, actually. Like the way it raced, in the sense of what the dirt was. And I don't know the last time you've been to like Wheatland and Lucas Oil, but they've reconstructed the dirt there in the last 2 or 3 years. And this past weekend, it raced a lot like Wheatland. Long straightaways, kind of pinchier corners, but the bottom was still kind of slimy. So I don't know if we really got a great grasp on what the tires really did, because we were all hunting brown, and that doesn't really show you anything. It doesn't teach you what your race car's really doing, because your left rear's in good dirt. And so it kind of cancels out on each other. So I don't know about if it's been good, bad. I can tell you I ran 50 laps and I didn't murder it. I ran a 3, which is something to speak for. I mean, that's one of the things. I did notice that the feeling, I don't know if obviously you looked at your stuff after. Mine looked like it had more of that 1600 style wear out, where it just kind of grinds it down more than trying to feather it off or blister it off. It looks like it more just kind of sandpapers down. That's kind of what I noticed. Now I don't have a lot of experience with open tires. The one time I ran open tires was when we ran the Outlaw Tour. When we went to Atomic and we went to Port Royal and those places. Like I've maybe run 20 races in my entire life on open tires. So I don't have a ton of experience with it. I can say that I've had a lot of good runs when I ran open tires, so I wasn't complaining when they decided to switch over. But I know there was a few guys that didn't like them this weekend. So I don't know. It's kind of a toss up.
But the problem is if you don't like them, it doesn't matter because they're not going to make the other.
You're right.
Which is sort of, I don't know. I don't understand that part. You know what I mean?
Well, here I got another good one for you. So I just found out today, we're supposed to race Friday at Brownstown, Illinois, and we called up to Hoosier because we need to get some more threes. They don't have any new threes, and they don't have old threes. And they said, hey, sorry, we're not going to have one for a couple weeks. So now what are we doing? So we quit building the old three to build the new three, and we don't have enough. So, I don't know what we're doing here. There is no game plan. And that's, I think, the most infuriating part for racers is this point that we get this thrown on us, and then we end up in a tire crisis where all of a sudden we're painting tires again, and you can only run one a night. You can only buy two at the truck and all of these things, but that's not
Back to COVID.
Yeah, it's not the way it should be done. And that's why, to your exact point, is that this shouldn't be done in April. It should be done in August going into the winter and say, we're going to open up on these tires. So I don't know. It's an infuriating part of our racing. And the thing is you're exactly right. It's like, sorry, you just have to deal with it. And that's part of the game.
Yeah, there's nothing we can do about it. I mean, and realistically, Hoosier tire is can make great tires. You know what I mean? The scary part is, and none of us thought about this till COVID, is there's only one plant. And if there was a fire there or something there, it would shut dirt racing down completely. You know what I mean? So, it's, if you think about that, I mean, sprint cars, it's late models, it just keep going. Street stocks, whatever, midgets. So it's actually, when you think about that, man, they've got a pretty good gig. Yeah. Can't believe Gordy Gundaker.
Have you ever went? I'm guessing you've went and toured that place. Have you?
I have.
Yeah. I'll tell you what, I didn't realize how big it was until, we had gone there and Irish took us around and took us through everything. And the best way I can explain it to people is when you go to Plymouth, Indiana, you roll in there, when you go to like a Walmart Supercenter, you see all the Walmart trucks pulling in and out. Well, when you go to Plymouth, Indiana, you just see Hoosier tire trucks rolling in and out. It's all you see. And it's one after another. And you look down and it looks like one of those three-dimensional, photographs. It looks like it just goes on forever when you look down these tire racks. And it's just the craziest shit you've ever seen in your entire life. How many tires are produced at this plant every day?
Yeah. I mean, they're capable of making great tires. You know what I mean? Sometimes they get off, but I mean, around here we can run either. We can run American Racer or them, and we'll switch back and forth some. But it's, for a traveling series, I don't think it's a good thing to have to have the option, because you're back in the day when we raced. When I raced up and down the road, shit, we'd have 15 compounds. It ain't like nowadays. They've actually simplified it, and that part of it's way nicer. You know what I mean? Your trailer doesn't need to hold 45 tires anymore, even when you're on the road. We used to have way less cabinets and way more tire rack than they have now.
I remember the days. I mean, you just think back to when they had even just the tens and those things. The combinations you could run and have. And I mean, you had to have, they've at least, simplified it somewhere. It's 3-4 right rear, most places, and 2 or 3 on the corners. Well, like back then you had to have 10s, 20s, 30s, 40s, 55s, all of those. So I am thankful for that, but it does suck that they could produce what would be a great tire for all of us that didn't disintegrate or didn't, that was a tire you could race on a lot, but instead we just race them one night and throw them off. Or, a lot of the big teams do, I should say. We don't. We hawk them like no other and flip them and do all those extra things. But it does suck, I think, from that standpoint. It better because you race in that area. I feel like they built this tire to compete with the American Racer tire. Is that kind of what you get?
They did. They brought it here. Actually, they brought it here to our Speed Week last year, and they gave it to like 5 of their. Well, supposedly when they started that tire deal, they took everybody's tire deal, but apparently they didn't. You know what I mean?
Right.
So they brought it to their 5 favorites, and they had them at our Speed Week last year, and they ran them. And I think they were allowed to run them first 4 nights, and I think they won 1 out of 4. So it wasn't like it was day and night different. I was still shocked even after that test that they still went through and did that, but I'm not sure. Yeah. Not their
guy. And that's the only thing that's I don't feel like the decision making, which I said this before, is when they make these decisions, I know why they don't ask us. But in my opinion, it's like, man, why wouldn't you get all these racers together and circle us all up and say, hey, do we think this is a good idea? Do we not think it's a good idea? I know why they don't do it. But at the same time, it's like, man, we could make this a hell of a lot better. Right?
Have you ever, we used to have these meetings when we ran World of Outlaws, we'd have these meetings at Charlotte. And probably the worst idea ever was to get the top 10 in points in a meeting. Some of the guys would argue both sides of the same conversation. It'd be like, hey, wait a minute. 2 minutes ago, you were on the other side. Now you're over here. I don't think that's a good idea, but we should have a little input for sure. Yes.
Yeah. Right. Well, and that's what I mean. I'm not saying we should make the decisions, but it seems like any decisions that are made are picked on from maybe a few guys, not the entirety of the group, which we all pay to play. That's the part that sucks about it.
We have 2 Speed Weeks back here this year, and Jim Berneisel's putting them on. So he came out with his Speed Week deal, and it's American Racer only. So I live back here in PA, and I don't call anybody, and I don't hardly get on the internet. So it's pretty quiet around here. You know what I mean? And I had more phone calls that in the first week that you could ever imagine. Of people calling me and what's your opinion and this and that and then Jim called me one day and he says I didn't know racers could be this mean. I said, Jim, you didn't expect that? I said, you should have expected to be a little mean. And like I told him, I don't know if it's a good thing. I don't know if it's a bad thing. I'll tell you, after the Speed Week, their tires are a little cheaper. If we don't go through more than we would at Hoosier, it saves me a little money. I'm good with it. You know what I mean? So if we use twice as many tires and they're only $10 or $15 cheaper, it doesn't make any sense to me. So I don't really know what my opinion is. I'll tell you after June.
Perfect. We can't wait to hear it.
You miss touring, bud. You miss touring.
I do miss touring. I love touring. I was the one guy that drove all night every night to get to the next racetrack, but that's just me. I don't know, like when winter would come, I don't know what normal people do. You know what I mean? Like on a Friday night, I'm in bed by like 9 o'clock because I don't know what normal people do. I just was always in that mode, you know what I mean, to where you just went to the next race and it's probably why I'm terrible at scheduling, because I never had to schedule anything. I always just looked at the schedule. That's what I had to do. You know what I mean? So now it's like I schedule stuff and people are like, when are you gonna do this? I'm like, shit, I got time. I got to figure it out. Never scheduled anything for myself before.
Yeah.
Would you do it again? I mean, if the right situation came, would you come back out again?
I am pretty old. I would if you had enough help. You know what I mean? If the right situation, if you had enough help. I don't no longer do I want to drive all night long and then get up at 8 and start working and you know. But I can't say I wouldn't do it. Yes, I would do it. I'm not out trying to do it. But if nothing's going to come up. But if something would come up like that, and it was a crazy offer, I would do it for sure.
Well, Granite City's got a big race in September, and I'm sure Gordy's going to be doing a lot of promoting. I know you guys tried to put something together last year.
Don't tell me it's the second week of September again.
No, it's the last weekend of September.
I'm in. Second week.
And I'm telling you right now, I want you here, man. I think we all do.
Well, I'll tell you what.
I know who definitely wants you here. I could just tell you somebody that we both know. I'll guarantee you when he sees this that Eckert's coming in September, Mike King.
Oh, Mike King's a great guy.
He is terrific. I'll guarantee you right now, he's like, when he sees this come out, he is like fist in the air, like my man.
Yep.
If you remember, I remember when Mike got the baseball jersey and he had the 24 Eckert, and his boy played. Great family, man. Just a great family. I mean, he's got to be one of your biggest supporters.
Dude,
They're great.
I'm still great buddies with Mike.
Oh,
I'm
that's
still great buddy. He drops stuff off for me all the time.
Yeah, we'll text. Actually, last year I don't think he made it in, did he, Bob? Year before. Last year something came up he couldn't commit. Year before he went to Florida on vacation and then drove to PA for a weekend for racing.
That's awesome.
I'm like that's on the way home. You know what I mean? That's not on his way home. No,
good guy.
Yeah.
He's always cool. Dude.
I got a question for you, Scrub. You look back at your entire career. What is maybe not the biggest? What was your favorite win out of all of them? What was it?
I don't know what I have a favorite. The one that sticks out the most to me is, and this sounds stupid, is I had Bloomquist cars. I went to, and I was on the tour, World of Outlaws tour, and my motors got to blowing up, and Eric Jacobson loaned me a motor, and I blow it up. And when shit's not going your way, it's just not going your way, And Eric's always been great to me, great, super great guy. So I'm in Canada, my truck breaks down. I blow up 2 motors, my truck breaks down. Lernerville's in a couple days, and Eric says, I called him up. I said, hey man, I blew your motor up. I said, but I'll fix yours first because I've had enough. I'm done. And he said, well, Lernerville's like
that week. I remember we talked that week. Yeah.
He said, well, Lernerville's in like 2 days. I'm like, yeah, no need for me to go there. I'm done. I had enough. I said, I don't know. Even a crackhead, after so many signs, you got a sign. It says, no, you know what I mean? Yeah. And he's like, let me call you back. So he calls me back. He says, hey, Scott's going to get to Lernerville. He'll bring you 2 of my motors. Just put them in, just race. And I'm like, dude, you're like giving a crackhead more crack. You can't do this, But anyway, so I borrowed some motors from him, and we went to an Atomic race. Not Atomic. I'm sorry. It's in Ohio. Attica. What's the sprint car track in the
Attica?
Attica. So we go to Attica, and we set fast time the first lap and blow up the second lap, hot laps, time trials. So pull in, and Zach was actually working for me then. And I said, Zach, let's just put her in a box. And my wife's with us, and she said, what are you talking about? I said, I've had enough. I can't do this. I said, I can't afford to do this. I don't know what I'm doing. This is stupid. And Zach's like, really? I said, man, this is dumb. And Timmy from Canada, do you know Timmy Morency? He's been a big fan, like Mike King. Like he's a great guy. I talked to him a lot, and he was there. So my wife says, you might as well just get the other car out and run it. So I get the other car out, start last in the heat, miss it by 1, come through the B, get in the feature. Halfway through the feature, there's a red flag. We're stopped in 3 and 4, and we're sitting there and making an open red. Back then they had open reds, made an open red. And I'm sitting there, we're to 5th, and we're rolling, you know, and Zach comes over and he says, "Hey man, did you park over top of a water puddle?" I said, "Zach, I'm sitting dead in the middle of this racetrack." He says, "There's water all under our car." I said, "Zach, that means the radiator's broke." I said, "Meet me at a trailer." So I drove to the trailer. We changed the radiator, came back out, and passed Josh with 1 to go and 1 to race. So that night, I went through so many emotions that you know, I was quitting, I was done, and then by the end of the night, you're like a crackhead. You're like got a new fix. You know what I mean?
Dude, it's crazy how racing will do that to you. Yeah, like I've always said racing is the world's most humbling sport. Because about the minute you feel like you got it all figured out, it'll stomp you down harder than you've ever been stomped before. And
It'll beat you down. Sure.
You're ready to quit. I mean, not to go off on a tangent, but I mean, I just went through that this weekend. I mean, we went and ran Wheatland last weekend, broke a rear end in hot laps, thrashed a change of rear end, ended up making it through the B to run like 10th on Saturday, and then go Thursday night to Cedar County, and I can't even line up. Qualified in the back, heat race in the back, B main in the back. We went to the race car Thursday night, found some things, went Friday, sucked just as bad. Couldn't figure it out. Decided on it was a transmission from the rear end break-in last week. Changed the transmission Saturday, and we run 4th. And,
Nice.
you know, and it's just one of those deals that it's the most rewarding sport, but it will take everything from you at the same time, you know, which is probably why we keep coming back.
Yeah.
You know.
Well, the other thing, Rick, you're off to a great start this year. You know, I mean, you've got some nice wins already. I mean, a couple of port, you won at Delaware. You got Seals Grove last week. I mean, that rocket car of yours is pretty damn good.
We were actually 4-0 and then got beat Saturday night. So I run 3rd there. I should have run 2nd. I fell out of the seat on the last lap, gave up 2nd.
Does that mean you're going to grow the mullet back out then?
I can't. I just can't stand hair on the back of my neck anymore. Yeah.
And this weekend, of course, you got 3 big Lucas races, and you know, then you're good at all 3 of these joints. I mean, and I noticed the other thing, Hagerstown doesn't run supers anymore, huh?
No, they've.
It's just kind of a special event only type deal.
Yeah, they run maybe 3 or 4 open races. They've turned it into a lot more of a backgate racetrack where they run off of they have limiteds and crates and 4-cylinders and street stocks and that's the direction they went probably 4 years ago, maybe.
Okay.
And it's a shame because at one time it was the nicest racetrack in the area, you know. But the problem is, like, I'd like to be keyed up for this weekend. We are running good. The problem is when them guys come to town, we can't run the tires we normally run. So we're at a slight disadvantage, you know what I mean? Because Hoosier built 2.25s for our area, which are really good. They'll outrun the American racers, and most of the nights, and they're really good. But the only problem is when Lucas comes down, we got to get back on 2s that aren't as good, you know. So our cars are different. So it takes the home track advantage away from us, in my opinion.
Yeah. Well, it's like you race there all year to get that advantage, only to get it stripped right out from you when they show up.
And I get that they don't want to run them. I applaud the series that they don't make their guys run them tires, you know. But really, we shouldn't be able to run them either. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
You got a favorite track, you know, of the 3 that you really, really enjoy? I mean, you got to be excited about going back to Hagerstown. I mean, you've been
Hagerstown's fun. I like going to Georgetown. I like going to Port Royal. Port Royal's a beautiful place, you know.
Oh, gorgeous.
You can go there and race, and and usually not tear up much, or if anything. And really the pits are paved, and your trailer's not even dirty. You know what I mean? So it's actually pretty nice. It's very nice. All three of the racetracks I like. So I'm good with all of them.
That's great. That's great. Well, man, we covered a lot of ground tonight.
Hey, Scrub, I got a good one for you. My what I consider my biggest win, I got to shred the door off of Scrub passing him at Fairbury.
Exactly. And I've never won there. So I was a little sure about that. I'm not going to lie to you. No.
I'll tell you what, it was so.
No, I wasn't mad at
I
you.
literally, I don't know how many times we've got to race with each other over the years. It's not a ton, but when I've got to race with Scrub, Scott, Berkey, McCready, guys that I, looked up to, it always is cool to me to line up with them guys and race, right? So I catch Scrub with like, I don't know, 7, 8 to go. And Shirley just chops him enough.
I'm trying to get the lead, and he chops and he goes by us both. I'm like,
I had just wide enough opening to go by, and I'm telling you, like we hit, and I mean, I shredded the left rear quarter panel off of him in the door, and it ripped the quarter panel off of mine. It was like, man, I really don't want to run over him, but I gotta go, and I think my favorite part was I was like, man, I really hope Scrub is not going to be mad at me when we get done with this. And he come up to me in my interview, and he just gives me a good old hug around me and said, I'd have done the same thing. Honestly, it is
racing.
Is a top 3 moment of mine easily. But it was like, man, I'm going to KO Scrub here for sure. And I can feel it coming, but I got to go right now.
Sometimes it's needed. You know what I mean? Sometimes it is like he held me up. I was trying to get the lead from him, and he held me up, and I slipped a little bit and left the door open, and I'd have done the same thing. I wasn't a bit mad about it.
No, I know. It was so funny to me as I was just like, I know if I let him back down here, I'm not getting another shot at this. I got to go like hell now. I think you run second, though, didn't you? Second or third?
I did run second. And really, I never run good at Fairbury. I do love the place. And I tell you what, they got some of the greatest fans. They really do. Them fans will let you know if they like you or not, for sure. It's pretty cool.
The only thing that we were robbed of that night, which sucks, is that was the night that big storm come in as soon as the race was over. So we didn't do like a normal victory lane where they interviewed second and interviewed third, and we all took a picture together. So I don't have a picture commemorating that night, unfortunately. Like, it would have been the coolest thing in the entire. I'm telling you, I guarantee it'd be hanging on my wall forever if we'd have had a picture from that night, standing just in victory lane together. But it was, I'm telling you, it's a core memory I'll never get to live down. And I get to not let you live it down. That's the best.
That's cool. Yeah. I'm good with it.
I can tell you, we miss you in the St. Louis area. We miss seeing the Big Orange coming through here and spending some time together. We've golfed a lot. You give me a lot of shit on the golf courses and everything else. And you've always given me a hard time. I still love it.
When we were whipping up on him, when it was him and Spike.
That's right. I learned one thing I learned about golf. I'm not good at it, but if I talk enough shit, it'll make you worse too.
No, we did. We let him have it that day.
I remember one time we played together, and he was like playing terrible. And he looked at me and says, "You know what, Martin?" He goes, "I would rather lose playing with you than win." And he got me just to get me fired up, because I was like, I know you're better than this. I know you're better than this. He says, "You don't understand." He goes, "I would rather lose than you win."
Oh, man.
And I'm like, that's just not right.
But hey, I'm glad. That means we're going to have to play if you come in for the Outlaw race.
I think it's great. Hey, Rick, is there anything that we didn't talk about that you'd like to talk about? I mean,
I just
what's it like being a granddad, man? It's just getting older now with Courtney, and I mean,
well, that part's cool because
pretty cool.
I actually moved 45 minutes from my shop to up near them. And so I go to every ball game, and my granddaughter dances. My grandson plays ball. He's baseball, football. basketball, and she dances and all that stuff. She compete, and so we're pretty busy at that part. That part keeps us
That's
busy.
awesome.
But
That is awesome.
that part is really cool. But living close to them. Matter of fact, they were over for dinner last night.
Is there anything that we didn't cover that you'd like to talk about, or do you think we covered pretty much everything? Is there anything you want to talk about?
I think you guys are in enough trouble. I just want to thank some of my sponsors.
I was gonna say.
Suburban Alley Oops, Dryadine, Firehouse, VP Racing Fuels, Stockley Speed and Supply, M&M Painting. So I'm going to take Alan racing some this year. So we'll go out there and come some of them Summer National stuff and get to race with you somewhere.
Oh, I can't wait. That makes me happy.
That's
cool.
greght.
Yeah.
That's great.
I'm pumped. That's good.
Well,
we'll have to we'll recreate the FedEx 50.
There you go. I'm too old for that shit now. But I'll still try.
Yeah.
Well, I guess we're going to sign off from the Dirt Parlor tonight. I can't thank you enough, Rick, for being on the show with us, and it means a lot. I mean, I've looked up to you forever, and man, you're like one of my heroes, man. When I first started getting into the watching and writing, I mean, in the journalism, you were always there for me, and I appreciate it. Always.
Cool. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely.
Yeah, we're gonna have you on again, Scrub. Don't you worry. Maybe when you're in town, we'll have you in studio to
Bring you right in here with us.
Yeah, then we're gonna have to bring up Gordy's rapping career he had one time.
Oh gosh. Oh yeah, that was also your fault. I got a lot of memories. And it all started with Scrub stirring it up.
How much money did you make that night?
God, it was like $270.
See that? You gotta use your talent.
And I got like 15 hats and 10 shirts. And,
Yeah.
And I have like lifelong friends who still bring that up all the time now. So
that's awesome.
Oh, the Troyer race car guys still talk about that.
That's cool. He's a
All the
great
big
guy.
block guys.
Yeah.
So all right, Scrub. Well, we love you. We appreciate you. And we'll see you soon, man.
Can't wait to see you.
Awesome. Hey guys.
Let's talk a little bit about last week. I mean, first of all, we got to talk a little bit about you. I know it wasn't the weekend. It started off for you. Thursday was a nightmare, and then you worked your ass off to get better for Friday and didn't have the results you wanted. But well, what a turnaround. I mean, then you come back against some of the best cars in the Midwest, and you run fourth.
Yeah.
Talk a little bit about it.
Yeah, just one of those weekends that really did not go planned at all the way we wanted it to. Thursday we struggled mightily at Cedar County, and I knew from really the drop of qualifying that we had something kind of messed up. And once the night was done, we headed back to my buddy Chris Simpson's shop, and we plugged away till 3 a.m. trying to find something, and we come across a few things and worked on some shocks with my buddy Chad Simonson, and thought, okay, we had found what was wrong, and we were going to go back Friday and get after it at Burlington, and that did not end up being the case. We struggled Friday just as bad. We qualified terrible, we heat raced terrible, we B-main terrible, and I just, something was off. I couldn't figure out what it was. I mean, we changed racks, we changed lowers and ball joints and stuff in the rear end, just all kinds of things trying to find it. And we come back to kind of thinking of the week before we broke a rear end at Wheatland and thought, man, maybe it took a transmission with us. That's a delicate part of our racing right now is how finicky these transmissions are because of the how much pressure we're putting on these things with, how our cars are lifting up, and those things get a little out of whack, and it can ruin, traction and stuff in a race car. So Saturday we changed the transmission, and I mean, from hot laps on, I could tell, okay, we have a race car to race with, and had a lot of fun racing with Trevor in the heat race, Saturday. Roll off 11th in the feature, and I kind of knew, I think as a race car driver, when you have a good piece even rolling around under yellow. And I felt that way rolling around before, in the 4 wide and stuff. And hell, we took the green, and it was like we were shot out of a cannon, and we charged right up through there and got to racing with Carson and Dennis and Brian. And thought I was maybe going to be able to snooker Carson for second there on the restart, but just wasn't enough to get up off of 2. But, it was a great rebound. In all reality, it really salvaged what was an awful weekend. So I got to thank really my guys. I work Aiden and Robert to absolute death. We had our new guy.
You mentioned you were shorthanded a little bit.
Yeah, and we actually we didn't know if Robert was going to be able to go last week, and Aiden has been going with us, and we actually called our buddy Zach that works with Garrett Alberson, and then said, hey, do you know anybody that would come help us? He posted on Facebook. A guy messaged him within damn near 2 minutes and said, hey, I run sleep mills. I'd love to go just with you guys. And Cole Brandt went with us this weekend. So we ended up going from maybe 3 sets of hands to 5 guys that ended up going. And we needed every one of them. I mean, we changed a lot of stuff all weekend, and it was frustrating for sure. I hate it when weekends like that happen. I don't like missing races, for one. That's one of the things that irks me more than anything in this entire world.
And your father.
Yes, and absolutely, and then having to listen to Dad, kind of harp on me about what the hell's going on is not fun. And it makes me want to work harder, but it just, man, it infuriates you. So you hate it for your sponsors and all the people who help you get up and down the road, because that's not really what our race team is shown. And it's so when those things are happening, man, you want to get out of it as fast as you can, and really rebounding with that group of cars on Saturday and coming from 11th to run in the top 5. Really was good for us. It was good for me, really. I mean, truly, because there's nothing worse than thinking, man, is it me? Do I suck? Right now it's like, I don't feel like I do, but God, it didn't, I wasn't showing that I was worth anything Thursday and Friday. So, it was a great rebound. I'm glad, we go into a home race this weekend at Brownstown, and then we lead into Mississippi Thunder. So I'm glad we got that.
There. And you've been good.
Yeah, and I'm glad we got that out of the way. And it gives you now we know some more stuff to look for when things happen. We know from now on, if we break a rear end, we're going to change the transmission with it. I can promise you that much.
Well, I went to Knoxville, and I drove right by you on Burlington, and it was kind of a nasty, dreary day on Friday, and I still thought we were going to race. It was weird, as it looked like the only rain in the forecast was at Knoxville, and it was one of those. It's like, you just knew that it wasn't going to happen. And it was no fault of the racetrack or whatever. It just wasn't going to happen. I mean, it's 30 degrees. It's misting at 5 o'clock. And I know what Knoxville's thinking. And even if they would have raced Friday, I don't think the track would have been any good.
No.
They wouldn't have been able to move it up. It wouldn't have and you know what? And I think anybody that noticed that they waited around Saturday, the sun came out Saturday, and we all know, if anybody watched the highlights, the track was perfect.
Yeah.
I mean, they moved it. In qualifying, it was slick as a button. In qualifying, they were up on the fence, and and I couldn't help but notice, and we talked a little bit about it earlier, the fact that the high limit guys, there wasn't very many of them there. But Rico naturally he found it, and he got an early number. And he took advantage of it, and he went out, and he was great. And we all know the race of the night, though, was Brian Brown and Kyle Larson heat race. I mean, if you have not seen that heat race of those two guys trading sliders, it cost Larson the win on Saturday.
Yeah.
Because Larson, by not getting in the dash, had to pass all those guys to get into it, and he was running Rico down a little bit and needed to traffic, and he needed a couple of breaks. But the bottom line is, if he gets in the dash, who knows what happens.
Yeah.
David, who I picked to win, David Gravel, and then I saw David's even interview where he talked about how the fact that he ripped the top around the entire racetrack, and he wishes he went to the bottom.
Yeah.
And it cost him. He still rallied for a nice 6th place, but anytime that you go to Knoxville, and all you hear from the drivers, and I'd like you to talk a little bit about, it's like, and that's why they have the car counts they have and the quality of cars, because everybody's already talking about August.
Yep.
It's amazing. Here we are in April, and they're all talking about August, how you never can get enough laps. Yep. And the guy I felt sorry for, it was really a rough night, and we both know who it is. Donnie Schatz.
Oh, yeah.
I thought it was funny. I was sitting next to Richard Marshall in the suite. And Richard kind of leaned back in his chair, suite, looked over at Jennifer, says, somebody I'm not going to say goodnight to when we leave the racetrack tonight is probably Donnie.
Yeah, yeah.
You know, so
yeah, that
I'd like
was
to see kind of what your thoughts are for the Knoxville weekend.
I can't imagine. I haven't talked to Donnie about it, but I can't imagine he was thrilled. That's a place that he expects to be up front at. I know the competitor he is, and I know when things do not go his way at places where he expects to be up front, man, he's not a happy camper, and rightfully so. So I don't know. I didn't get to watch the full night. Obviously, we were racing as well. We were trying to keep up when we could and different things, but that's part of racing right now, and I think that also goes into them still learning their package and all those different things. And obviously now they have a lot to work on, which is great for them to go there in April and realize, hey, we got a lot to work on before we get there. That they're going to step up their Eldora game and different things, but there's a big gap between where they want to be and where they are right now at that stuff. But, what a race. Anyways, watching the highlights of the feature on Saturday, that's what makes Knoxville as great as it is, right? It is the most technical place, I feel like, of any of the racing we do, whether that's late models, sprint cars. That Knoxville is the most technical racetrack in the country. And the reason I say that is when you watch guys run the top, at Knoxville, they'll enter in on it, and you'll see them, and they'll get right rear on it, and then they get tight, and then they steer off it, then they got to get back on it again, and they got to follow it all the way around. And when you run the bottom, you better be all the way down in it and get all of it, because if you miss it by inches, you're sitting out in the middle of the racetrack, wheel spinning, praying for the cushion to get closer.
It's so funny you mention that, and I was watching Sheldon, and you could just tell the car wasn't balanced. You could look at him when he was driving. How you mentioned, you got to have all four wheels right there on the bottom. You got to hit, and he washed up the racetrack.
Yep.
And you could look, you're just losing ground and losing more ground.
Well, it's
and we both know, and the kid's so talented. So you're like, even if we see it, he knows.
When all the races I've got to watch there now over the last couple of years, going to the Nationals every year. Guy rolls down there when the racetrack is slick out in the middle and it's got the big berm up top and the brown shaker on the bottom. The guy that goes down there and misses that little brown, it looks like he's got a piano tied to his back. It is that much of a difference. And you talk about how difficult it is to run that place and how technical it is. That's why the guys that win at Knoxville are the best in the world. If you win at Knoxville in any form, whether it's in April or you win in August or whatever it is, you are a hell of a wheelman, because that place is not easy to get around. Now, I've never raced there in a late model, but I've watched enough laps to know that that's not something you just hop in there and you go out and go, yep, I know right how to get around this place. There's no way. And that's why the Nationals are the biggest dirt race in the country. When it comes to sprint car racing, that is it. That is the pinnacle for those guys. And because it's not easy to win there. And I think that's why I enjoy going so much as a race fan, to enjoy that weekend and see it, because you know how hard those guys are pushing, the things that you have to do inside that race car to win or be up front and be competitive. Is not easy at that place. So I think the fans got a small taste of what they're going to get in August. For getting rain on Friday and cold weather, they killed it on the racetrack.
Yes,
you couldn't ask for anything better.
Well, and our guest, Jake, last week who was on the show, Tyler finished fourth, and they had they were solid. They were solid all night.
Yeah.
And if you watched him in the A-Main, he was, he got by Reitzel, and passing Aaron Reitzel at Knoxville is not easy to do.
Right.
But I thought it was interesting, and being in the suite, I was up there with Tim, and with Tim Clausen, and watching Tim, and Tim's so smart and knows he's watched enough races around that place, and watching Tyler run there and hearing some of his commentary up there. I was blessed.
Yeah.
To be around there, to hearing Tim say, stay on the top, don't. Now it's time to come. Now it's time to do it. And Tim is, and I'm sure that those same words that I heard up there when the races were over, Tim knew exactly what laps, what to do, what a coach and what a mentor to be down there to help, Jake and, Tyler both. And I think Tyler's got a shot at this thing in August. He gets better and better. And like we talked about how they're getting there. And I think that Clausen Marshall team is flying a little bit under the radar. Now, the only thing that we talked about throws a little, wrench into the plans a little bit because it's 50 laps, just what Jake mentioned last week. But that kind of covers Knoxville a little bit. Then I want to talk a little bit. We got a big World Outlaw race not too far up the road here this week in Jacksonville, Illinois. It's a big event for those folks up there. And I know you've raced at Jacksonville a little bit, and you've got Jacksonville Hopstop with them, and you got a great little badass bull ring in Brownstown, Illinois, that I know like you and Bab and Figure. Everybody I know really seems to like that place up there. So let you talk a little bit about, that this weekend.
Yeah, I mean, for the Outlaw perspective of it, Jacksonville always has put great races on up there. That's a cool town. Jacksonville doesn't seat a lot of people, and they sell that place out every time. I think it's, which is really cool. I think it's neat. I think did Sheppy run the?
Sheppy tried to run it.
Right, the sprint car.
We all thought he was good. I remember me and Brian Shirley, we were like, hey, he's going to be great. Yeah. I'm like, you realize what he's racing with here? It's not a MOA show.
Yeah.
And then even when Larson stepped in, Larson and Rico, some of the high limit guys.
Yeah. And so I think that event always produces great racing for those guys. Hobstad's its own animal in itself. Helfrich and those guys, he's going to have his tractors out probably 9 times that night doing it. But it's always fun to watch those guys slice and dice at that place. It's kind of the same way in the late models. They always put on a hell of a show because that's kind of one of the places they bang the boards and they're getting up there, but then somehow somebody will sneak in there wheeling right around the bottom. They do
Brady
great.
Bacon won last year. I don't think we expected that.
I wouldn't say so, but that's what Brady's really good at that place in a non-wing car, and so that I think that feeds into it.
And
obviously,
they said that place actually races a little bit. Like if you have a non-wing driver, that's one of the easier places to race with a wing.
Yeah. Well, it has to be because you're doing what you do in a non-wing car. You're pitching the thing in there and you're just hammering on it. So it's always fun watching this weekend of races with the Outlaw guys because it's a completely different style of racing than you normally see. Brownstown, Illinois for us is they've become a hidden gem in the Midwest. And I think this started 5 years ago, really, 5-6 years ago. I love going there. I think it's a great place. Josh and his group do a great job over there. One of the things that's so cool about that place is it's also kind of a technical deal because the bottom and the top are 2 completely different styles of racing and how you drive them. If you run the bottom at Brownstown, Illinois, you got to be super slow, patient, way off the throttle. If you run the top, you better be all the way in the gas and you better be all the way against the rail, because if you go sliding to it or you're not against it, you're out in no man's land. It always produces great races. A lot of sliders, a lot of different things happen. It's a dirty, wheel spinny place at times, and then all of a sudden there'll be a bunch of grip in the bottom for 10 laps, and then all of a sudden you got to get off of it and you got to move. So, excited to go back there and, hopefully get us a Mars win this weekend. That'd be a great way to kind of come off of last weekend and lead into what is Mississippi Thunder, next week for us. So, yeah, I'm excited about it, and hopefully, there's going to be a lot of great cars there still. I mean, I know you got Lucas races and stuff this weekend, but it's another tough field of cars, that'll roll in there Friday night, and probably 35, 40 cars again. It does not get any easier.
No, and that brings it up. We got the National Series back on the road. We got the big one in Alabama, Talladega, 50,000 to win.
Yeah.
And last year, the weather kind of like just killed that event.
Yeah.
And so hopefully I looked at the forecast. It looks pretty good down there early. So it looks like that's going to make it. And then you've got the 3 days, we had, with Rick Eckert, our guest. Boy, it'd be great to see him pull off one of those.
Yeah.
I think
that would be cool.
That would be badass. But because he's familiar at all three of those places. But it's neat to see both series now as we get ready to get into the month of May, and the separating. The Lucas guys are going one direction, the Outlaw guys are going in another direction, and so I'm pretty excited about that. And I'd like to know kind of who you like kind of this weekend a little bit. I'm kind of going. I like the old man. You can't talk about Talladega and Dale Mack.
Yeah.
And I mean, he's been good there. They've had a few races this year. And Dale's been really good, and I know the Outlaw guys, Bobby and them are coming in and stuff. But that place gets a little slick and slows down a little bit. That 17M car with Shane and Dale, it might make some noises.
I think Dale will be good there. I think also a guy, obviously, like Michael Page that races down there a lot. I mean, it's hard to not pick him when you go down there. I mean, I know when we went down there and raced a couple years ago, all those guys that race down there are really tough. But after watching it firsthand, man, that 32 car is God, it sucks racing with him. I'll tell you what, because you look at Carson Ferguson did everything right to win that race, and Bobby does what Bobby does, and that's what you just got to tip your cap. And I bet if you went back and asked Bobby, he probably would tell you he didn't think his race car was that great, and that's scary to know that it wasn't that great, and he still finds a way to win. So I look for Hoffman to be good down there this weekend. I look for Jimmy Owens was good when they went down there a couple weeks ago. So I think Sam Seawright, obviously.
Won the Ice Bowl.
Yeah.
And,
so
I think there's some,
Overton, I think Brandon. Nope, Brandon will be in Lucas. Yep.
I'll tell you who's I noticed when I was looking at some of the results. Ashton Winger runs good there.
Yep.
And it's close to home.
Yeah.
And he's had some top fives, and he's had some really good runs at the Hunt the Front races. And another guy who we talked about early in the year, it's been kind of a surprise, or even in our top 25, Zach Mitchell.
Yeah.
I mean, don't count that guy out.
No. Zach, you watch him race enough. I mean, that guy, them southern racetracks, man, he's always near the front of all of those. You see him clip off top fives and top threes and racing for the win. So I'd say he'll be a good pick as well.
You got a pick for Hobstadt and Jacksonville?
Jacksonville, I will take David Gravel. I think
he won last year. So
I think Gravel's going to be tough there. And then Hobstadt, I'm going to go back to back. I'm going to go Brady again. I think Brady's got that place. I mean, he was the year before that. He didn't win, but he was up front of it. So I think Brady goes in there and stumps him again.
I like Buddy Kofoid at Jacksonville.
Okay.
And I like Carson Macedo at Hobstadt.
All right.
I think Carson had a tough weekend last weekend.
If I got to pick an outlaw guy not Brady, I'm going to take Sheldon on Saturday.
That's a good one, too.
Yeah.
That's a very good pick.
Yeah.
And after Sheldon and Carson's runs last week, not having the finishes that they wanted at Knoxville, I don't think you got to tell those guys to
they'll be gassed up.
They're going to be ready to go.
They'll be gassed up.
But I think we covered everything in the Dirt Parlor tonight, Gord. And I'm excited about hearing what goes on next week. We'll recap all the races and talk about Gordy's wonderful week. You're only going to run one time, right?
Just once.
Just once this week?
Yep, just Friday.
And Tri-C Speedway's opening up at
They're opening up Friday, yep.
Okay, so good luck to Kevin and Tam.
Yep.
And that covers it here. I, again, want to thank all of our proud partners of Nutrien and Hoker and Bodies by Skinny and your company, of course, Checker Customs. So let's have a great week, folks, and we'll see everybody at the races. Anything you want to say?
Oh, man, I'm great. I'm excited to keep bringing on awesome guests, and hopefully we can talk about me winning a race one time on this thing.
I like it. All right. Thank you, everyone.